The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Holy crap. What a weekend, huh? Oh my God. I almost broke my my rule of no shows on a weekend. It just, the desire to do something, to just get on here and speak into the nothingness about the free agency stuff was a very strong one, and I managed to push it deep down. Obviously, we family things going on, so that made it a little easier to not do the work. But first thing Monday morning, got to get a show going, because free agency is upon us, and it was everything. It was everything we could have hoped, and then some. I went ahead and I made a list of every player that signed over the weekend. I think I got all of them. My guess is that, there's about 25, 30 names on this list. I probably missed one. I'm sure somebody opted into a contract that I forgot to put on it, but I'm really doing my best over here. Going through the lists, we've got the big ones, we've got the small ones. I even put the little babies in here just because everybody deserves a moment. And this is like, oh boy, this is such a rabbit hole too. I'm hoping you guys did the same thing I did. I don't know, maybe if you're over here on this side of the fence and you like, this is my life. This is the stuff. I just sat there watching Twitter, watching all the crap fly by and trying to analyze it as it happened. One thing that I will say, the leaking right now, when you look at the big free agent stuff, the leaks coming out of teams are really obvious, trying to figure out where they're coming from. We talked about this last week. I talked about it with Neil on the Thursday show. Just anytime you see a story come out about a particular huge, superstar free agent or trade candidate. This time it was a lot of LeBron, Kawhi stuff. Those were all the leaks coming out. You could almost always trace it back to some team that was getting a very small bump. But we'll break that down. We'll get to it. I don't have a set in stone plan on how we're going to go through this stuff today. There are too many names on this list to do it all in one show. We're just going to sort of plow through it over the course of the week. Oh man, what a weekend. What a day. What a 24-hour period. It all happened within 24 hours. It's just that it was 9 p.m. to like 7 p.m. the next day, and then it just kept going. So, where to begin? We begin with, welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan Bespris. This is a Hoop Ball presentation. You can follow us all on Twitter, at Dan Bespris, at Hoop Ball Fantasy, at Hoop Ball Tweets. We're going to have a Lakers podcast coming out over the next 24 hours as well, obviously. When your team signs LeBron James, when your team signs the best player in the universe, you probably want to do a show just to say, hooray. We'll talk about how all that thing shook itself out. It was kind of cool to see some of the info come out after the fact. So here's what we're going to do. First thing on the docket for today's podcast is, if you're new to the program, I'm guessing a few of you probably are, just given all the stuff that happened over the weekend, you're likely looking for some NBA information. If you're into the fantasy stuff, which is what we generally cover on this podcast, that's going to take a little bit of a backseat to the reality stuff, at least at first. We're going to hit both sides. Don't worry. We'll hit the fantasy stuff as well. In passing a little bit at first, and then as the week progresses, and obviously these signings are slowing down, teams have used up their cap space, then we will turn our attention to, well, what does this mean? The reason that I don't want to get into too much fantasy stuff on each individual player as it happens is because, in particular, when you look at a guy like LeBron James changing team this morning, or late last night, I should say. This morning, we're looking at it. You have to look at not only what it means for LeBron, but what it means for about 11 players around him. Maybe more, considering how many guys the Lakers are bringing in and how many guys the Cavaliers are likely to try to get rid of as they go young now. Because it's rebuild time in Cleveland. You ain't winning with that group without LeBron. You win very little, actually. And then you start to talk about what it means for LeBron, then you get into what it means for Kevin Love. It's too much. That's the real rabbit hole here. You could end up I could do an entire show just on what LeBron moving from the Cavs to the Lakers means from a fantasy perspective. I could probably do a week on that. And we will. The thing is, more things are happening. You know, the Cavs are trying to unload guys, and that could happen over the next couple of days. So, you know, it's kind of stupid to spend a whole bunch of time today before we know who else is going to be signed. So the plan here is we're going to go through the signings. What does it mean from a team perspective? And then we'll be talking to Adrian Benjamins on tomorrow's podcast. Of course, we'll be co-hosting that bad boy. Wednesday, I'll be with Neil Rochlani for a special July 4th edition. Thursday and Friday, we'll have shows as usual. Thursday, I will be by my lonesome. And then Friday, Adrian and Neil will take the reins. Then we'll start to dig into the fantasy stuff. Each individual player. How it impacts all the guys around them. Because there is so much fallout. What I'd like to do at the beginning of every show, over the course of at least this week, my plan this week, we'll see if it trickles into next week at all. By the way, after all of the dust settles on this, probably in the next 2 weeks or so, we will rehash all of these teams. Remember, we just went through all the teams in the NBA and how their seasons went and what to expect. Now we're going to have to rehash a lot of them because guys change teams. So that'll be the rehashing, the preview now of these fantasy teams going into next year. That'll be coming up in a couple of weeks. What I was saying before, what I'd like to do at the beginning of every show this week is just announce everyone that's been signed. Everybody. And I'm going to do the whole list on every show. So on this one, it'll all be new to you. If you're listening again the next couple of days, a lot of the names will be the same. I'm going to try to do them in the same order. So if you are listening to today's show and then you're listening to tomorrow's show, you can just ignore everybody up until the last name I say on today's list. This is basically in chronological order, not perfect. It's not perfect. But you can see most of the guys that happened on that very first couple of hours, the 9 p.m. here on the West Coast, the midnight deadline. Between that and about midnight, I stayed up for as long as I could before I just ran out of gas. On the first night, and then the second chunk of names on this list will be most of the guys that signed on Sunday. Sunday, the day, I should say. Okay, so here's the list. And again, it's not perfect, but we're going to start with Kevin Durant. 2 years, $61.5 million to the Warriors with a second-year player option. Rudy Gay, 1 year, back to the Spurs. Joe Harris, 2 years to the Nets at $16 million. By the way, Rudy Gay was at $10 million. I don't have the price on all of these things in front of me. The most important ones, I think I wrote down the number. DeAndre Jordan, 1 year to the Dallas Mavericks at $24 million. Aaron Baines, 2 years to the Celtics. Jeremy Grant, 3 years, $27 million to the Thunder. Will Barton, 4 years, $50 million to the Nuggets. Paul George, 4 years, $173 million to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who, by the way, now have the largest luxury tax bill of any team in NBA history, if they don't cut Carmelo Anthony. Chris Paul, 4 year, $160 million to go back to the Houston Rockets. Doug McDermott, 3 years, $22 million to the Indiana Pacers. That was an interesting one. Trevor Ariza, 1 year, $15 million to the Suns. Ed Davis, 1 year to the Nets at $4.5 million. Marco Bellinelli, 2 years to the Spurs at $12 million. Ersan Ilyasova, 3 years to the Bucks at $21 million. Gerald Green, the veteran's minimum. He goes back to the Houston Rockets. Omri Caspi, 1 year to the Grizz. Derrick Rose, 1 year to the Wolves. I think that was basically everything that happened that first night, although maybe one or two of those might have trickled into the second day. Second day, obviously highlighted by LeBron James, 4 years, $154 million to the Los Angeles Lakers. He's going to Hollywood. Freddie Van Fleet back with Toronto on a 2-year deal. I forget the number. I think it's $18 million for him. Lance Stevenson to the Lakers for 1 year. That one I don't fully understand, other than I guess LeBron maybe just wants to scrimmage with him. Heat, 2 years. Derek Jones Jr. at a bargain basement rate. Glenn Robinson, 2 years to the Pistons. The third, I should say. Big dump number 3. Salah Mejri back to the Mavs, but who cares? Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, $12 million 1-year deal to the Lakers. Mario Hezonja, the Knicks got him for $6.5 million. That feels like a pretty good deal for a guy who showed some nice upside second half of last year. JaVale McGee to the Lakers for a small, I think it was $4.5 million. Thabo Sefolosha has his contract guaranteed by the Jazz. And Elfrid Payton, a 1-year, $2.7 million deal to the New Orleans Pelicans. And that, I believe, is everything that's happened up until this morning. Like I said, there's a possibility that somebody very close, like we've heard that Aaron Gordon is very close to re-signing with the Orlando Magic. I think that there's a 4-year, $84 million deal that's on the table right now. I don't know if it's official, but we can put him loosely on the list. We've also heard that Brook Lopez expected to re-sign with the Lakers, but we don't have that in writing yet. We've heard Chris Bosh is expected to try to sign with the Lakers. That's idiotic because he could die. It's not worth it, Chris. It's not worth it. Nerlens Noel choosing between the Lakers, the Wizards, and the Thunder right now. And that is basically where we sit. Oh, I think Darren Collison had his option picked up by the Pacers, but we all knew that was going to happen. So I'm not even putting that on the list. Okay, that is the massive list that we sit on right now. It took me 10 minutes just to get into that stuff. But oh my God, what a week. What a weekend. I'm so excited about all this stuff. So the biggest news, obviously, and I think that's where we have to start, is LeBron James to the Lakers. 4 years, $154 million. But it doesn't matter. Nobody cares about the money. It's a lot of money. He makes more than that in endorsements and other stuff he's got going on. You know, he can get himself the LeBron soundstage in Los Angeles. I want to spend some time with how, like, the stories here. The story is, to me, just as interesting as the final conclusion, as LeBron actually ending up in a Lakers jersey. Because over the last week, we've had so many crazy conflicting reports. There was, LeBron is maybe going to go to Houston if he opts into his deal with the Cavaliers, and he opted out. He's expected to talk to the Cavs at 12:01 Eastern time on Sunday morning. We don't know what that was about. And then yesterday, the reports came out that he was going to be meeting with the Philadelphia 76ers representative, or at least his agent was. There was the Nuggets continue to make a hard push to get a meeting with LeBron. There was Houston continues to pursue LeBron until an official decision is made. And we heard nothing about the Lakers. And a good friend of mine is my buddy Todd, who's a Lakers season ticket holder. I was talking to him on GChat, and he said something to me like, well, it seems like it's all going poorly. Paul George signed elsewhere. Now it looks like Boogie Cousins is the thing, Kawhi Leonard, and there's no deal there yet. And I said, well, you know what? I'm actually kind of happy. These are my words. I can probably go back and find them. I said, I'm actually happy that whatever the Lakers are doing, they're doing it in secret. That's when good things happen. All of the leaks coming out. First, the leak that... let's trace it back. Let's go back a little bit farther and get to the... This is how I became extremely confident. This is reading the tea leaves, by the way, and I don't have any inside information. This is just reading the bunk stories that keep coming out. And as they came out, first, there was a lot of Kawhi stuff. It was Spurs are not talking to the Lakers. Spurs are willing to talk to the Lakers. Spurs are expecting big offers from the 76ers, and then it was a story that came out the Sixers hadn't actually included any of their big three in the discussion yet. There was the Spurs are talking to the Celtics, and then Danny Ainge came out and said, nope, not really. That was a big deal. Then there was the story that said LeBron James didn't want to be the first one to commit to the Lakers. He didn't want to be the first superstar to say, I'm going to go to the Lakers. He wanted to join someone else who was basically in cahoots, like with the Miami Heat. And then we heard a story that leaked that said that wasn't true, that LeBron will make his decision independent of the other superstars. All of that, to me, said LeBron is going to the Lakers, and the rest of this stuff is garbage. And here's why I felt that way. And it's not just because I'm a Laker fan, because I also thought Paul George was going to the Lakers for a long time, and they did a pretty good job of keeping his stuff under wraps. But, he was saying nice things about the Thunder, too, so, it wasn't all locked in. The reason I felt so confident on the LeBron side, and I think I said it on our last Lakers podcast over at Hoopball Lakers, I said I'm the most, and Eli said it too, we said we're the most confident, actually, that LeBron is coming to L.A. because of the order of the leaks, the chronology of how those events took place. The first leak that said the Spurs are not engaging with the Lakers, very clearly a leak that came from the San Antonio Spurs, right? They put that out to try to drive up the price of their guy. The next leak says, they are going to talk to the Lakers. I don't know where that came from. I'm going to assume that was a leak from the Lakers side. Blah, blah, blah. That one didn't mean a whole lot. That just got the ball rolling. The second and the third leak and then anti-leaks that I mentioned a moment ago, those are the ones that really put it in stone. The second leak was LeBron James, report. LeBron James does not want to be the first superstar with a team. That was a leak that very clearly came from someone other than the Lakers, because when you look at what that means, that meant either Paul George was going to go to L.A., and if he signs in L.A., then fine, LeBron follows him, or Kawhi Leonard. That's the one where this makes a lot of sense. Oh, okay. So this leak is saying somebody needs to get Kawhi in order to get LeBron. That was an obvious Spurs leak. Because they're trying to drive up the price of Kawhi Leonard and try to get the Lakers and the Sixers, those are really the two teams in play, to try to make a bid and a bidding war for their guy to get LeBron James. And then LeBron comes out and says, I don't know if it was himself or he put it out through one of his associates, but the anti-report that says, no, report, LeBron will make his decision independent of other superstars. So LeBron's camp came out secretly, leaked a story that basically told these teams, don't give up all your assets for Kawhi Leonard right now. I'll come first. That was LeBron trying to save all the pieces on either the Lakers or the 76ers. That was clever. And it didn't take long either, because the story came out that he didn't want to be the first one, and then within hours, the story came out saying, nope, I'll be the first one. But nothing was official. It was never a Spurs official or a LeBron official or a surrogate. It was just, this is what's leaking out. This is what we're hearing. If the story came out first that LeBron was going to be making his choice independent, frankly, I don't think anything would have leaked if the Spurs hadn't initially said, oh yeah, here's the story. LeBron doesn't want to be the first one. You obviously better trade for Kawhi right now. Oh, man, I love it. And then the last stuff, everything happening in secret at the end, to me, that was a great sign. That LeBron was suddenly meeting with the Cavs, with the Sixers, and we didn't hear anything about the Lakers. And he had said during his end-of-season exit interview, I'm going to do what's best for my family. Guys, we've talked about this. LeBron's kids are enrolled in, I think it's in Sylmar? No. It's called the Sierra Canyon School. It's in northern Los Angeles County. If he's going to do what's best for his family, he's going to go where they are already. Isn't that where Scottie Pippen's kids went? I feel like somebody else, famous superstar basketball player, sent their kids to this joint. There were all these reports about how LeBron was supposed to meet with Magic at midnight, but no one knew if it actually happened. That's great. I mean, that was like... Anyway, so then we get the report. Ramona Shelburne put it out, and then Lee Jenkins, a story with SI that sort of filled in all the details, that Magic Johnson had gone to LeBron's house in Brentwood. Apparently, I live within a couple miles of LeBron James. Go figure. That story, by the way, in Sports Illustrated talked about LeBron having brunch on Sunday at a Votre Sante in Brentwood. That's walking distance from my home. I've been there. It sounds really fancy, but I had a hamburger. Yeah, I'm a simple man. So I thought that whole thing was so interesting, just the way that everybody kept putting out stories to try to drive up price on their guy, to try to give their fan base excitement on a particular thing. But at the end of the day, the only team where it really makes a lot of sense was LA. For Kawhi, that's what the Spurs were doing. Try to get them to go get Kawhi. Because the Sixers, they have a core that can be really, really good, even without LeBron James. You know, they have a transcendent superstar in the making in Joel Embiid. They have a brilliant young point guard in Ben Simmons. I love the Lakers, but those two guys are better than the two young stars on the Lakers. The Sixers were already the third seed in the East this year without adding anybody. The Lakers won 35 games, about 20 fewer. A little bit less than that, than the 76ers. Which, yes, means the Spurs had a better package they could put together to go get Kawhi Leonard, but it also means they really didn't have to. So all of this stuff was just a build to try to get the Lakers to go give up the entire farm to get Kawhi Leonard, when the Lakers felt pretty confident they were getting LeBron anyway. And for Magic, I mean, to him, he knew. At that press conference saying, I need 2 years to make this thing come together or I'll quit, he knew. He knew he had one this offseason, and even if they don't trade for Kawhi right now, he believes he's getting him next offseason. And then we got a story that Kawhi is willing to sit out this year. So this is like the pushback now. I love this. This is so fun for me, and you guys might be bored out of your mind with this podcast, and for that I apologize, because you were expecting probably lightning round fantasy analysis of all the stuff that happened. But I just... reading the tea leaves, this is what we got to all get really good at, and looking at how the stories break is the best example. I mean, now we can look back and see how everything happened and understand why it happened that way. All of these stories coming out from the Spurs to try to get the price up on Kawhi before LeBron chose a destination, and then Kawhi immediately comes out and says, I'm willing to sit out the entire year until you trade me to the Lakers. That's like the real punchback. That's funny to me. It's funny. I mean, it's because at the end of the day, it's a game. It's a game, and everybody's just trying to leverage each other, and the Spurs were trying to leverage things, and it didn't work, and so now Kawhi's like, I'll sit, so you better just trade me. So he's trying to drive his price down now, knowing basically that the only team that's bidding for him is the Lakers. Nobody else is going to give up a bunch of assets for a dude that's promised repeatedly he's going to LA. I know it worked for the Thunder and Paul George, but the Thunder sort of had no choice. They just decided to go for it. Who else is going to do that? Is Boston? No. They're not going to give up their hundreds of young assets on a burgeoning team that just brought in Gordon Hayward, who missed a whole year, and Kyrie Irving. They're set. They don't have to make that move. Philly doesn't have to make that move. The only team that really wants to make that move is the Lakers. So anyway, that's how all that stuff shook out, and to me, that was super interesting. The Paul George stuff, not quite as interesting, although it was kind of fun to see the story that he was flying to Oklahoma City for a midnight party at Russell Westbrook's house with Nas performing. But anyway, that's the good stuff. So we had this monster list. We had all this. God, didn't the 24 hours between when it all started and when LeBron actually signed, less than 24 hours, didn't it feel like an eternity? I had so much fun watching Twitter with all this stuff. So before we got into free agency, all three of us here on Fantasy NBA Today, myself, Adrian, and Neil, we picked guys that we thought could be sort of flying under the radar free agents that become fantasy values. My guy was Mario Hezonja, who went to the Knicks for $6.5 million, and I think he'll actually be pretty good in New York. There isn't a whole lot of impediment to him getting playing time for that team, especially because it sounds like they're trying to trade Courtney Lee, so that'll open up 30-some-odd minutes on the wing. You shift Tim Hardaway down. I know they have this new kid, Kevin Knox, but Hezonja is a bit more established, and he can play the 2, the 3, the 4. It's nice wiggle room there, especially with Porzingis expected to miss some time at the beginning of the year as well. But again, like I said, I don't want to get into too much of the fantasy stuff. What I will say on today's podcast is that of all of the things that took shape on the last day and a half of free agency, the 3 or 4 things that I'm watching the closest, the 3 or 4 situations that I'm watching evolve are, and this is in no particular order, Mario Hezonja on the Knicks, because we already knew I'd be watching that one. Ersan Ilyasova on the Bucks, which I thought was a really interesting one. Jeremy Grant on the Thunder. Obviously, this one's going to depend largely on what happens with Carmelo Anthony. And Joe Harris on the Nets, because by committing some money to Joe Harris, it seems like they might actually play him now. I don't know, but maybe. There's a lot of other guys that are sort of on the radar in terms of what their move from teams actually means, but I eliminated the dudes that, to me, felt like this was a wash. Like Trevor Ariza, he'll always be the number 60 fantasy player. That's just who he is, and he'll do it with a crap-dink team in Phoenix as well. They gave him a ton of money to go be a veteran presence on the wing for a team that has a bunch of wings. I don't know. I mean, are they going to pay him $15 million to sit on the bench and mentor? I don't think so. I think Ariza wants to go try to win someplace, so he's expecting them to try. I'm not all that interested in Doug McDermott in Indy. I know that he signed this $22 million deal that had everybody freaking out. It's still only $22 million. Remember when dudes were signing 4-year, $65 million deals that were about as good as Doug McDermott? Those were bad deals. This one's very movable if they had to, down the line at least. And then obviously everything with the Lakers and the Cavs. I mean, they're going to be... I need so much more time than I have to get into what those mean. Because LeBron leaving Cleveland, how many of those guys are going to be left? George Hill, Kevin Love, there's so many names. The Lakers now, they're just piling up bodies in L.A. LeBron comes to town, so then Lance Stevenson and JaVale McGee join him in L.A. And KCP is back with the Lakers, and Brook Lopez might come back, and they're talking to Julius Randle today about maybe coming back. And I've seen reports that the Lakers are targeting Shabazz Napier, who's always been one of LeBron's favorite young guys. There's just, what a disaster. That's going to be now what we saw in Cleveland, where there's going to be very select guys around LeBron that can sustain the usage and playing time to be relevant. That guy might end up being Lonzo Ball, amazingly, because defensively he is outstanding, which we know that's something LeBron wants around him after having none of it in Cleveland. He's also a ball mover. Lonzo's a ball mover. It doesn't stick with him on offense. The guys where it sticks, like Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, they're going to have to change their games a little bit, or they're going to get shuttled in and out of the ball game and staggered a little bit for guys that catch and shoot a little more. And what does JaVale mean? What if Brook Lopez comes back? Could he end up being a massive, massive fantasy boost this coming year, just getting open looks all over the joint? I don't know. We got to see how everything shakes out, but there's so many people now, so many Lakers that are just appearing, and they haven't traded anybody yet. We also, by the way, saw a report, just to finish up that thing, LeBron talking about it being a long-term play with the Lakers, which is funny coming from a guy who's 33, but that might have been his way of saying, don't trade for Kawhi. I can get him here next offseason. It's not going to be like the Paul George thing. Also, doesn't it seem like Paul George just doesn't want to play with LeBron? That's twice now he has not gone to go hang out with the king. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to basically put a pin in this thing. Today was all about just setting the table, telling the story of how Saturday and Sunday unfolded, taking all the different stories and rolling them up together. And then the rest of the week will be dedicated to breaking down what it all means. So, we've given off the list, the first list here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think it's about 30. We did about 30 free agent names. Am I right? Is that close? 28? 28 or 29? I'm trying to count them on the fly. 29 names is what I said here on this podcast. If anything happens, we'll obviously add those to the list, but we're going to go through them one by one over the course of this week, the rest of this week, and tell you what it all means. And yes, prepare yourself for basically a full episode dedicated exclusively to LeBron moving from east to west. Also, our good buddy RJ Bell sent out a tweet over the weekend that I think was aggregated from other people's information. Every single all-star free agent so far has signed in the Western Conference. Many of them returning, by the way, to teams they were already on. Chris Paul, we figured he'd be back. Paul George seemed like it was down to 2 Western Conference teams. But without anybody going to Philly and without anybody going to Cleveland and with Indiana just getting Doug McDermott, I mean, this was, yeah. The East is wide open. Don't try to convince me that Boston and Toronto didn't want to see LeBron James go to the Lakers. They are thrilled. Those teams are going to be fighting it out, probably. Well, Philly's in there as well. All 3 of those teams are ready to make a run for a finals appearance. The East is garbage. Crazy. All crazy. So we'll break it down over the rest of this week. We'll probably have some more names on the list. Some of these restricted free agent deals will probably be put in stone. Presumably Aaron Gordon by tomorrow. Maybe Julius Randle. We've still got Boogie Cousins and Isaiah Thomas floating around out there. So believe me, there's more to be done. And that's why we're delaying getting into the deep fantasy stuff. I will go ahead and call it. That's time of death on this podcast. 9:05 a.m. here on the Pacific Coast. A half an hour show of me just ranting and raving about what a crazy weekend it was. That was a low content episode of Fantasy NBA today, but hope you guys enjoyed listening to me go crazy. I am Dan Vespers. This is, as I just mentioned, a hoop ball presentation. Again, back tomorrow. My co-host, Adrian Benjamins, will join me. We'll start to go through this stuff from the fantasy side, and that's the task for us now for the next couple of weeks here on the podcast. Please rate and review the show if you haven't already. You can do that through iTunes or the podcast app on your mobile device. All of our shows here at Hoop Ball are available now on YouTube and Facebook. You can follow the website at YouTube. The channel is just Hoop Ball, and over at Facebook, it's Hoop Ball Hoops. That's the name of the Facebook page. Again, I'm Dan Vespers, at Dan Vespers on Twitter. Give me a follow if you want to see my thoughts on all this stuff as it shakes out. And with that, I bid you adieu. We'll talk to you on Tuesday. My God, what happens next?
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.